Today I have a very exciting video, especially if you were like me and a huge Aether storyline fan, because today there has been a new cipher solved, and this cipher, as you may have been able to tell that we're talking about the Aether storyline and not the Dark Aether storyline, is actually not from Cold War, and instead this cipher is from Black Ops 3, more specifically Gorod Krovi, and my gosh, is this interesting to say the very least. Now, I will admit most of the stuff is known, but it's mainly only known by some really hardcore players for zombies, or I guess, some huge storyline nerds like me. So I wanted to actually share this information with you, and this brand new cipher gives me an opportunity to share the information about this one character that really is incredibly interesting. But before we can even get into the cipher, first I need to give credit to the guy who actually solved it. This guy, of course, goes by the name on Reddit, finsternacht. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. And if you guys want to, show some love, which I recommend you do, go down in the description. I'll link his Reddit post. Hit him with the upvote, because my gosh, this man's doing the Lord's work. He's working on ciphers that are 5 years old, dude. Absolutely insane. Love that man for it. But either way, with that all said, let's get into this cipher. So what the cipher says is Tony Hale Wrapped. Where have I heard that name before? I just can't remember. Anyways, better get back to work, as Mr. Wrapped has paid me a handsome sum to investigate and gather people and items he needs. After I'm done here in Morgue City, I have to head to San Francisco to interview the test subjects. The idea of being trapped in a prison gives me creeps. So this cipher is incredibly interesting, gives us a lot of opportunities to talk about a lot of different things, but for now, I want to actually ignore the last part of the cipher. We'll come back to it, trust me, because it's incredibly interesting, but for now, let's ignore that last part about San Francisco, prison, test subjects. We'll come back to that, don't worry about it, but for now, I want to first look at this cipher and question three different things. One is, who is this Tony Hale Wrapped? Second, who is the one who wrote down the cipher? And thirdly, what is this person who wrote down the cipher doing when he says he gathered these people and items that Mr. Wrapped needs? And we'll answer all of those, first starting with, who is the one who wrote down this cipher? Well, this one's pretty easy because we know it to be the reporter, and that's kind of not easy to say that it's just the reporter because of things we'll get into later. Trust me, it gets a little confusing because of course it's the Aether storyline, but we'll just leave it as the reporter. And I'm pretty sure this is the exact same reporter that we see in, or I guess hear in, the radios of Shadows of Evil. And in these radios for Shadows of Evil, we can hear that he is working for a guy named Mr. Wrapped, as we also hear in the cipher. And we also hear he's looking for 4 people and also gathering 2 different items. Again, something we see similar in this cipher. As for the people we know that he is actually looking for in Morgue City are who you might expect. The Shadows of Evil characters, of course, being Jessica, Jackie, Nero, and whatever the boxer's name is. His name slips my mind. And he was gathering those 4 people there into Morgue City. As for the items he was gathering, we actually learned this from another radio inside Shadows of Evil.
These last 6 months you've had me working like a low-rent private dick. When really, I just want to be a reporter. It's not that I'm ungrateful. I know the checks you've given me have been more than generous for services rendered. It's just all this stuff you've had me do. Tracking down ancient artifacts in the South Pacific, finding all these strange metals and rocks in Russia. And still, I haven't even met you face to face. I'm sorry, Mr. Rapp. I think maybe the mood in the city is getting to me a little.
The part of the radio where he says Mr. Wrapped has had him tracking down ancient artifacts in the South Pacific and finding all these metals and rocks in Russia. For now, we'll keep that Russia metals and rocks thing on the side because, ooh, that's exciting, but for now, we'll just first focus on this ancient artifact in the South Pacific because we know exactly what this is. And I think my first storyline video ever, it's terrible, don't watch it, but like my first storyline video ever was actually on this because we know exactly what this ancient artifact is. And if you played Shadows of Evil, you probably recognize exactly what this is because right as you enter into spawn, there's a box in front of you that you could open while you're in beast mode, and this has no none other than the summoning key. Yes, this reporter was actually the one to first get his hands on the summoning key before the Keepers, the Shadow Man, the Apothekins, even Richtofen. He got his hands on it before anybody else, and he actually brought it to Morgue City. And of course, this summoning key was clearly used in the events of Shadows of Evil, and as you may tell by what this reporter was doing and what Mr. Rapt was having him do, you may be able to figure out the identity of Mr. Rapt, because he brought the 4 characters for Shadows of Evil to Morgue City and also brought the summoning key to Morgue City. Well, yes, this answers our question, because this was none other than the Shadow Man. Mr. Rapt is the Shadow Man for the people who are unfamiliar, and of course by the reporter bringing all this stuff here, he allowed the events for Shadows of Evil to take place. And as you know, at least up until the Pack-a-Punch part, the Shadows of Evil crew used the summoning key to open up this universe or this realm for the Apothekins, and they released the Apothekins from the Dark Aether into Dimension 63, and from there that realm gets destroyed, and the whole Apothekins take over the whole place and assimilate the realm, as the Shadow Man says in the map, which is not a happy time for them. But at least by the end of the Easter egg, we help out the Keepers a little bit, but in the end it doesn't matter. Dimension 63 is consumed by the Apothekins. Now, in this radio, we also hear mention that the reporter is trying to go to San Francisco, and this is where it gets a little bit weird, because it actually turns out before the events of Shadows of Evil, a certain individual tried to stop this from happening, and this individual was none other than Primus Richtofen, because we actually have a cipher from the Reisendrache that is Richtofen talking about this reporter also, and I want to read it off for you guys. And what he says is, I met the reporter who was to deliver the artifact. He said he was going to bring it on his truck in a crate, but when I arrived, the reporter was babbling and acting wildly, waving a letter in his hand telling me to stay away. The crate containing the artifact had been sealed with some ancient magic. When I told him I must have the artifact, I moved towards the crate. He attacked me. I acted in self-defense, stabbing him in the chest. And this right here is incredibly interesting on its own, because as it kind of makes it sound here is that Richtofen was trying to intercept the summoning key from the Shadow Man, and unfortunately it didn't work for him because it was sealed with ancient magic, so he couldn't get into it, and he needed someone to go in beast mode and actually get it, and all that whole story, but that's not really that important to this. Either way, we do actually hear from this 2 things. One is that this reporter was waving a letter, and second, Richtofen had to kill him in self-defense. And from this is actually where we get our only in-game look at this character, and I'll put an image of him on screen right now. As you guys can see here, this man was stabbed in the chest, and he's holding a letter just like in the Richtofen cipher. Now, one thing to take note of is that this letter has the letter M on it, and as you guys are probably familiar with, the M is in relation to Monty. And this is incredibly interesting because there's 3 conflicts going on here, all people who are not really working together at this point. We have the Mr. Rapt, or the Shadow Man, who's setting up everything and trying to get the summoning key here and all that stuff. Then we have Richtofen, who is trying to intercept that, but before Richtofen even got involved, Dr. Monty actually got in contact with this reporter, and whatever Dr. Monty told this reporter made him act in a very violent way and was trying to keep everyone away from this. Now, unfortunately, we never learned exactly what Dr. Monty told him, but all we know is that because of whatever Dr. Monty told him, it didn't turn out great for him, and he ended up getting killed by Richtofen, which is unfortunate for him, but regardless, it is the fate that this reporter met. And at this point, you would think that this is kind of a problem, because the rest of this cipher that we originally started off with ends off saying, I have to head to San Francisco to interview test subjects. The idea of being trapped in the prison gives me creeps. And where did that all happen? Like, what's going on here? And this is actually interesting because the thing is, this reporter actually made it to the prison, of course, as you guys may have already assumed, Alcatraz, because we actually have radios in Revelations of the reporter interviewing Stanley Ferguson. So how exactly did that happen? Now we'll get into the context of this radio and the interview of Stanley Ferguson and the reporter in a little bit, but first off I have to mention, how the heck did this happen? Because clearly we just saw the reporter die in Shadows of Evil. Well, it actually turns out there are multiple different versions of this reporter, and in fact, the Shadow Man himself is looking for different versions of this reporter throughout the multiverse, which is something we'll see further in a little bit, and that's going to be interesting, trust me, when we get to it. But for now, I want to quickly return to that radio that we talked about, where the reporter is interviewing Stanley Ferguson, because you guys may be curious, who are these test subjects that he was supposed to look for in the prison or in San Francisco or Alcatraz, just at that? And at first when you hear this, you would think of Victus, right? He's thinking of Victus. The test subjects have to be Victus, correct? Because I mean, that's who we have probably considered to be the test subjects, but also we have the 1.0 characters also be considered to be the test subjects, so maybe it's them. I don't know, it doesn't really make sense. But it actually turns out all of those are wrong, and who at least these test subjects are, or at least who the Shadow Man is calling test subjects, it actually turns out that these are the Mob of the Dead characters, because in the radios inside Revelations, we hear that Stanley Ferguson interviews Stanley Ferguson, and in this he asks him a bunch of questions about what happened with those characters, and this is where we hear the real life story of these characters, right? In the, you know, where we hear during the Easter egg, where we hear that the three mobsters, they realized they were being tricked by the weasel, and then they killed him on the roof, and then they were, you know, put to death after that. And this may have to do with the Shadow Man learning about this and then him setting up Mob of the Dead, because in the end we do learn that the Shadow Man was behind Mob of the Dead, so we realized he could use these people into some time travel stuff or something like that. Either way, that's probably what that had to do with this, is because he learned about the mobsters and then realized he could use these mobsters in order to create Mob of the Dead. But this isn't the end for this reporter, because it seems like there was another version of this reporter, or it could have been the same reporter that we had that interviews Stanley Ferguson, or not. Either way, it doesn't matter, because we actually hear this reporter one last time. And what this reporter actually did was actually head to Russia, and this is circling all the way back to that Shadows of Evil radio, where he says that Mr. Rapt had him tracking down ancient artifacts in the South Pacific. We already know what that is, but for the second thing, finding all these strange metals in rocks in Russia. And this is where it gets so cool, and something I never got to talk about all the way in the past, because we actually get a radio in our final mention of this reporter. And in fact, I think I'll play this one through its entirety because it is incredibly interesting.
And secondly,
Here he is, Richtofen.
get your damn hands off me. Now what do we have here? A spy? If you know what's good for you, you'd let me go. Oh yes, yeah, I'm sure you work with someone incredibly important. Honestly, you have no idea. How did you find my secret facility? Who are you? I'm a reporter. I was hired by a man, Mr. Rapt. I never met him. He asked me to find some goods for him. Things he wanted badly. Sounds thrilling. And what was these goods he wanted so badly? Look, I don't know the specifics. He just told me to travel to Russia. He gave me these coordinates, which led me here. How was I supposed to know it was a freaking German base? He gave some vague description of a strange metal object. This, I assume? Yeah, that'll be it. Called it the Seal of Duality. Whatever the hell that means. Well, the real vessel is not for sale. And is certainly not for stealing. But it is curious. I have only just arrived at this facility, bringing the real vessel with me, yet you somehow knew it would be here. How is this possible? How the hell am I supposed to know? I just go where the Shadow Man says to go. I don't know how he does it. Listen, if Mr. Rapt wants to find you, he's got his ways. Look, you want to go ahead and get this over with? If you're going to kill me, kill me. Not like it'll matter. It's kind of funny, you know? Something Mr. Rapp said. About if I failed him and died, it'd be okay. He said he'd reach out to me all over the multiverse, whatever that means. I didn't pay it no mind then, but maybe some other me is out there having a lot better luck than I am.
Sir, what should we do?
Take the strange, sad riddle man away. Find a hole.
So as we could see, we actually learned what he was doing and where he was going. He was actually going to Russia to the original Toglertoten location. This, of course, is where the whole test subject thing, you guys probably know the original story, so we're not going to get into that. But regardless, as you hear towards the end of this radio, unfortunately, it doesn't actually turn out well for this reporter, and instead, he actually is killed by Richtofen and this guard. But this is where we first learned that there are multiple versions of this reporter. And this, of course, is where he says that Mr. Rapp told him that he'd reach out to me all over the multiverse, whatever that means. But that's something we had already, realized at this point. But what I really, really want to take away from this, and the whole reason I want to talk about this video to begin with, is because it's incredibly interesting what we finally learned, what exactly is that Mr. Rapp had sent this reporter to find in Russia, because before that we really didn't know. Like, all he said was that we needed to find some strange metals and rocks in Russia. But after Toglertoten, we actually learn exactly what this strange metals and rocks in Russia are, because what they actually turn out to be is the Seal of Duality. So this is that second thing, along with the summoning key, that the Shadow Man was having this reporter go and find. And this is incredibly interesting because we know how powerful the Seal of Duality alongside the summoning key is, because in the ending of Toglertoten, we see Nikolai use it, and we see how powerful that is, because Nikolai used the summoning key alongside with the Seal of Duality to close off the multiverse and to banish all the corruption or the ether or whatever you want to call it to the dark ether, and to create this single timeline universe in order to create, as we know it now, the dark ether universe. And we see how Nikolai used it and how powerful it was. But imagine what the Shadow Man was doing. He was also trying to get his hands on the summoning key along with the Seal of Duality. And imagine what he would have done with those two things. Unfortunately, we never do learn, but it's just insane to think about. What if the Shadow Man actually got what he wanted? Like, what did he really want? Because we know what Monty wanted, right? We saw that at the end of Revelations. We know what Nikolai wanted because we saw that at the end of Tog, but we never saw what the end game was for the Shadow Man. And clearly his end game was to get the summoning key and the Seal of Duality to do something insane. Now, what that is, that just leaves it up to the imagination, but unfortunately it seems like we'll never exactly learn what that is. Sadly. It's heartbreaking, but regardless, it's insane to think about that the Shadow Man was after that same power that Nikolai was, which I can't get over how insane that is. That's about it for this video. I love to hear what you guys think about everything we talked about today. Has it been a little fun time going back on that little journey of the Aether storyline? I know it's been fun for me because I never really got a chance to talk about this, and this Cipher really gave me that opportunity. So I hope it was something that was at least interesting to you guys, even if it really doesn't matter anymore since the sadly the Aether storyline is now over. But regardless, that's about it for me. If you guys did enjoy this video and you found it entertaining in any way, shape, or form, please do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go, and I'll catch you guys next stream, video, or wherever the heck it may be, and laters, guys.